Hunting wildlife helps Verl Brown stay in the ranching business. Every year, he earns thousands of dollars leading elk and deer hunting trips on his property. The hunting is limited to sustain the wildlife population, but it's a vital part of the ranch income.
I probably wouldn't be here right now if I didn't have it, and I definitely wouldn't have added any land to the ranch if I hadn't have had the hunting. You know, I enjoy the wild animals, but the land, I mean, that I'm here to take care of this land, and I watch it so close. I guess it really is tied in a big circle.
I'm a rancher, but I'm very much an environmentalist. We deal with the environment every second of our day.
A guide service pays the DeLines more than $30,000 a year for hunting rights. On this ranch, too, wildlife pay their way.
The wildlife brings in probably about a third of our income on the ranch. So yes, it's a very valuable asset to being a landowner and a rancher. We deal with the wildlife every day, from the beaver in our ditches to in the creeks and the elk and the fences and the work through the works. And if we can get along, it's much easier on us. It's easier on them. I would like to think that our future is much more stable, that we get along with the wildlife and work with the wildlife than somebody that does not.
And we welcome you back. There is the example. We've heard about what they're doing in Africa. There's our United States example. Can we talk a little bit more about that? I know you just returned from Colorado.
Well,
you were
yes.
there.
Yeah, I was right there. And I was speaking to men, not those two men that we've just seen, but ranchers with very similar backgrounds. You know, some of those people have been on that land for over 150 years in terms of continuity within family. Yeah. And they understand those lands and those landscapes and the interrelationships between themselves and the sagebrush and the sage grouse and the elk and all the rest of it. And the purpose of this meeting that I was at was to develop a collaborative initiative to conserve sagebrush right across the 11 western United States and 2 provinces of Canada. And this is because of concern about the way the sagebrush is being changed by the livestock industry, also much more recently by the energy industry. There's a lot of exploration and development going on for natural gas and coal. And there's a lot of concern about the potential impacts. And what this collaborative initiative is trying to do is to bring the landholders together with the industry, together with the state and the federal regulatory agencies to come up with really good ways of bringing all these interests together so that you end up with a much better conserved habitat. And so that instead of the industry going in and doing damage which may not recover for many years, using that as an opportunity to actually improve the entire landscape within the sagebrush biome. It's a wonderful program. It's only been going for a year. There were almost 100 people at this meeting, which has started out with just a couple of people inspired by St. County Foundation who thought, oh, this is a good idea, let's see what we can get going. So in a year it's grown from a handful to over 90 people, and I think the future of it's great.
That's great.
And it's really all about involving the farmers and giving them a fair shake in the conservation program.
Right, and making sure that everyone gets on board with that same idea.
Absolutely.
We've been talking then about 2 different things that are happening. How do you bring the 2 together?
We bring them together by focusing on the commonality of principles that are therein, as Mike said, in the St. County Almanac, and in using St. County Foundation as, if you will, a temporary home for this kind of thing. As Governor Ritter of Colorado spoke about the Cooperative Sagebrush Initiative the other night and St. County Foundation's role in getting that started, we see once again a case where a philosophy, a Wisconsin-born philosophy, is so common to people with common sense and with the drive to work, ultimately to work together. I think what's novel about St. County Foundation's work here really is the blatant and direct use of a sound philosophy, a land ethic, as a means by which people who might not otherwise come together do come together because they have so much more in common than they realize. And in this case, it's the efficiencies, the effectiveness, and above all, those positive outcomes that heal the land community, for sagebrush in this case.
And by coming together, we're not speaking of just people coming together in their own countries. we're talking about almost field trips of sorts where they're each going to their respective places to meet each other and to work together and learn these ideas from each other. Why is that important?
Well, let me give you an example of why it's important. I just spoke this morning with Terry Fankhauser, president of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association. Terry just led a delegation of Colorado policymakers and ranchers and farmers to Texas. What did they find in Texas? They found an example. They did an exchange in the same way that we sponsored exchanges of agriculturalists from the United States to Africa. But they found that ranchers around Fort Hood in Texas are doing better things for endangered species, and they're doing it in a way that accommodates to the purposes of Fort Hood, a very important military installation, and doing it on a positive, mutually rewarding basis.
Take that home and hopefully try to practice it, learn it. Is that kind of what you're looking for then?
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, the experience at Fort Hood was something that was talked about amongst the people at this meeting in Denver. So there is a lesson that's been learned, which is of great interest to other people, similar kinds of problem, but it's not tanks, it's people drilling holes in the ground to try and find natural gas. And then we did a really interesting trip a few years ago, or in fact we did two, which involved an exchange between ranchers from Arizona and the Maasai in East Africa.
Yes.
The Maasai are pastoralists. They manage livestock over very large areas of landscape in a semi-arid or arid environment. Arizona is also an arid environment. And what's happened in Arizona is that the ranchers have found that individual ownership of even relatively large blocks of land is not the best way to manage cattle. The best way to manage cattle is the way the Maasai do it in Tanzania.
So again, we're learning from each other.
Exactly.
Okay,
Now,
we have to take a break right now. We're going to
Okay.
be back to wrap this all up when we return.